Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining today. My name is Mike Nasis. I'm a product marketing manager at Zerto. And today we're going to discuss, will your data protection strategy pass a checkup or break the bank? We have two awesome guests today with us. The first one is Ted Balagtas. He's a CIO at Bankwell Financial Group. Ted, thank you for joining. And how are you today?
Great. Thanks for having me, Mike.
And our other guest is Lou Mejias, and he's an infrastructure engineering director at Cigna. Lou, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you, Mike?
I'm doing pretty well. Be- uh, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention both Ted and Lou are loyal, longtime Zerto customers. Again, thank you for joining today. And before I pass it off to you, and so you can discuss your stories at Bankwell and Cigna. Just wanted to level set real quick with everybody. When we look at financial services and healthcare, right, these two sectors that Bankwell and Cigna play in, we see some overlaps in terms of priorities, right? That businesses in these sectors are really looking at. So the first one is cloud and workload migration. So a lot of organizations in these sectors are beginning or have already accelerated that move to the cloud, and we're seeing a lot of hybrid cloud strategy within these sectors. Secondly, regulatory compliance. Of course, these are both heavily regulated industries, so being able to stay compliant and meet requirements, really evolving requirements, is a huge priority. And then lastly, I'm sure you could have guessed it, business continuity, right? Being able to get up and go, be back online after a natural disaster, after IT migration, even, or of course, a cyber attack like a ransomware attack is of utmost importance. So, what is top of mind for financial services and healthcare? So we're going to look at the challenges in these industries, and we're going to actually let Ted and Lou speak to them based on what they've seen. So in financial services, we're actually seeing an increase in ransomware attacks, of course, as they are a very vulnerable sector, being that they have tons of confidential and sensitive data. But we're also seeing remediation costs from these ransomware attacks rise. So the average remediation cost from a ransomware attack in the financial services sector is actually $1.6 million. So if you get hit with an attack, you're looking at a pretty hefty price to pay to be able to recover all your data and get back to where you were. And then of course, when it comes to top challenges, migrating workloads has been a top of mind challenge and concern really for these organizations. And as 60%, almost 60% of companies in this sector actually cite migrating workloads as a main challenge. So I wanted to let Ted speak a little bit more to these challenges and in terms of what he's seeing from Bankwell's perspective and what he's seen really overall in this industry with his experience. So Ted, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you for that. Yeah, as you can imagine, there's stricter compliance around data protection. Being in banking and financial services, there's a lot of regulatory compliance when it comes to the bank's data, especially with PII and non-public sensitive information. So any breach can cause negative financial and reputational harm. So information security is always top of mind for us. Another point is meeting SLAs for business continuity. And as you mentioned, um, in a disaster, and disasters used to be defined as major storms or events like Sandy and Irene, but um, what COVID-19 showed us is business continuity plans were tested, at least put into action, and any shortfalls had to be addressed, and businesses had to adjust accordingly. and allowing for app and data resilience. Previous IT architectures have the active passive methodology, but with businesses and critical applications needing to live in either site, technology had to be a little more flexible. So you're starting to see a little more active um, architectures, whether you are completely on-prem, hybrid cloud, or fully in a public cloud.
Got it. That's a great little synopsis of the challenges. So healthcare is similar, but there are some differences. But when we're looking at downtime, again, it's costly no matter what sector you're in. So you're looking at almost $750,000 in healthcare per downtime incident, and really that comes out to $8,000 to $9,000 per minute of downtime. So again, I'm not going to go too much into these numbers, but I will let actually Lou talk a little bit more, and he can give his perspective and what he's seen in the healthcare industry with Cigna.
Yeah, so thanks for that again, and very similar to what Mike was talking about, or I'm sorry, Ted was talking about in regards to protecting, our data, maintaining uptime within the systems, and then again, how do we gain efficiency inside of what we're doing? Um, we do have information that we have to protect, PHI, patient information, keeping it safe. So again, working with Zerto, making sure that the data is encrypted, making sure that it's protected, and then keeping the uptime as high as possible to lower. It's not just the financial portion of it, but again, from making sure that doctors can get to the records that they need, making sure that patients can call in from a call center perspective, not hit hold times that are excessively long, especially if it's critical care. The other piece again that we've talked about is that efficiency standpoint, and you mentioned also the ability to migrate workloads. As our environment shifts, we do have to either consolidate data centers or look at areas where we have to use Zerto for data migration. It's been a great resource for that. We continue to do it and look to expand as far as what we're doing. And then the last part with the HIPAA compliance, it's not just HIPAA, but also from a contractual standpoint. One example we have is we have a contract with a government agency, and it's very strict in what we have to do and maintain. And Zerto helps us with that, especially with low RPO, RTO times. And then from an audit perspective, we can do that as well. So it's been our partnership with Zerto is critical.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the low RPOs and RTOs. That's actually a perfect segue into into my next slide here. So Ted and Lou alluded to it, right? High cost of data loss and downtime. How do we mitigate that, and how do we reduce your RPOs and RTOs? That's a key driving factor for really any sector, but especially these very important regulated sectors like financial services and healthcare. So while there's a time and place, of course, for a backup solution, right? If you're simply relying on a backup solution for to protect your data, something happens, you get hit with a natural disaster, a ransomware attack, right? You could be looking at RPOs, in spanning 24 hours, an entire day or more, and RTOs of several hours, right? So that's probably not going to cut it if you have, again, if you are a hospital, you are, an organization that handles people's finances, things like that. You're going to need something where you can be up and running much more quickly than that. So with Zerto, we can actually have reduce your RPOs down to seconds and your RPOs down to minutes. Basically, we're able to do this by being able to rewind and recover uh, anything, essentially anything, in minutes from any point in time directly to your production site or your recovery site. So time is money, data is money, and um, when you put that together, you're talking a very high cost of downtime with legacy solutions like backups. So you really Zerto really delivers that drastically low RPO and RTO that many organizations, regardless of sector, really need. And before we kind of get into Ted and Lou's uh, journey, a little bit Zerto journey, if you will, a little more. Um, this one last mention here. Really, Zerto, particularly what Zerto does, we have a laser focus on three key use cases, and we've touched on it right over these last 10 minutes or so. Disaster recovery, right? So anytime there is a natural disaster, anything like that, we have you covered. Of course, ransomware resilience, that's another one that we really pride ourselves on, and it's really a key focus area for us. And then, of course, the cloud part with the multi-cloud mobility, which we'll talk about all three of these a little bit more in depth with Ted and Lou. But we're focused really on these three to ensure that all of our customers they can achieve continuous protection for any application, uh, any type of threat, whether it's planned or unplanned. Um, so with that, wanted to get into Ted and Lou's story a little more. So we wanted the first thing here we wanted to talk about is the journey. So we'll start with Bankwell, right? Some of the challenges that you've encountered and why you really have found that data protection has been vital for you. So with that, Ted, it's it's on to you.
Great, thank you. So, upon joining Bankwell, I had to identify some goals and IT imperatives as far as what to target first. Now, the first one is the need to strengthen business continuity strategy. We already expressed the importance of it within the financial services and banking sector, right? So, failover and recovery efforts during DR tests at Bankwell prior to Zerto were very manual, where they leveraged a lot of the enterprise backup snapshots. While DR tests that they performed were successful, it could take maybe like an entire day from start to finish. So one of the first goals was to look to reduce the RTOs while increasing the RPOs. Then another one that spun out of that was the question, do we invest more in hardware or look at leveraging potentially a DR as a service? So it's looking to build that site resiliency in our tertiary site as the hardware was aging out. So it became what's cost efficient and what is a more effective solution. And then once we choose that solution, it's proving out that compliance. Because as mentioned, we are heavily regulated being in banking, so we have to make sure we're hitting those RTOs and RPOs that we set forth in our BCP plan, as well as making sure the SLAs are accurate, because that's part of our compliance standards, and that's what auditors will look at.
Okay, that's great. So real quick, when you are when you mentioned compliance and migrating, so moving applications, has Zerto really helped at all with that? Maybe like the failover functionality, is that something that maybe was missing beforehand?
They have the ability to do so, just not in a time efficient manner. So with Zerto, if anyone that's used Zerto, you can have a continuous replication on and decide to do a live failover or a test failover, right? So the live failovers could flip it over and flip of a switch, and then you can reverse and replicate those changes so you can keep it in that alternate site if you choose to do so. And then if the business changes their mind or technology changes their mind, they can always flip back at another flip of the switch. So it
Sure,
did make it the ease of use to do so.
sure. Yeah, ease of use. That's of course that probably could be a fourth uh,
Right.
goal here, and I'm imperative. So Lou, same thing to you. Take us through some of your goals here that and imperatives that you had.
Sure. So again, to start, Cigna's mission our motto basically is to improve the health, well-being, and peace of mind of those we serve. I think there's a portion of that may not necessarily be front and center, and that would be the IT piece of that. But using Zerto, we are able to commit to that mission to make sure that we're protecting our customers, and then again keeping our uptime as high as possible. With some of the things that Ted talked about as well, the ability to roll back, the ability to restore quickly, which hasn't always been the case in other situations. We've been able to use Zerto again as a migration tool. We've actually migrated 4 data centers from a move to center perspective with Zerto, which again shows both the time invested and the ability to make sure that we do it the right way. We've expanded out with in some of our international entities as well, who are now also using Zerto to help them from both a compliance standpoint, their DR testing, their ability to roll back, and then some of the again migration tools that we've worked with. One of the key reasons that we engaged Zerto was essentially that we were still are a big VMware shop, but back years ago when we started with Zerto, SRM, the site recovery manager within VMware, we were struggling. We had a lot of incomplete and failed backups. We'd go to run a DR test and something didn't sync up with the storage side of things, and then we couldn't pass those tests, and it was becoming where it was a battle between the storage vendor, VMware, us, to get our DR test done properly on time, and then we have SLAs that we have to meet for those. So we reached out. Zerto basically offered up a solution. We tested it heavily, and it's been working nonstop basically. It helps us with compliance goals, and again, like I said, quicker ability to back up and restore.
Yeah, no, that's a great testimonial there. We've heard that a similar story with before with a lot of issues going back and forth with the storage vendor and VMware and all that. So that's a very common thing that Zerto helps with. So staying on the topic, I know you mentioned you're expanding to international data sites and all that. So we're going to get into that a little bit now. We're going to look at the IT environment of both uh, Cigna and Bankwell. So given these goals and imperatives that you mentioned, let's talk a little bit about what that means for your actual environment, and we'll look at kind of a prior state. So prior to Zerto, what it looked like, and then after Zerto. So Ted, back to you. So if you want to take us through, Bankwell prior to Zerto and what that environment looked like.
Sure. So, upon joining Bankwell and prior to Zerto, we had 2 data centers in our back office locations. And as mentioned, we do have a tertiary site and a co-location facility. And one of the biggest design flaws, if you will, was all of those locations are along the I-95 corridor along Lower Connecticut, right? So from a business continuity and a DR um, plan as far as how far sites should be, it wasn't the most effective use of that. So we had to look at something a little further away in the event that the I-95 corridor was taken out, right? So we want to make sure business continuity would still be intact while a location is far enough that it should not be affected by that disaster, if you will. As mentioned, it was more manual efforts to perform these failovers since we were using enterprise backup snapshots. When they brought those snapshots back into alternate site, a lot of manual re-IPing was done. They had to prepare the servers and whatnot before they handed it over to the business. So the DR test could take about 4 hours to restore the copies, and then any cleanup thereafter. So if you look at the next slide for after Zerto,
Sure.
um, it's still the same type of design where we're going to have the 2 data centers, but the colo is going to be much further away. So we were researching, as I mentioned earlier, whether to invest in that capital expenditure to buy all new hardware to make that site more resilient versus still maintaining a small footprint in a colo because we needed some vendor circuits that aren't available in a public cloud, we had to have our own dedicated equipment where they can terminate to. So a half rack and a colo was necessary. So part of that research, I wanted to look at any current Zerto partners today to help with the bring your own licensing model since we own Zerto today. We ended up choosing um, one of their partners in Expedient, and we have one of their data center locations up in Medford, Massachusetts, in the Massachusetts Boston area. So, upon looking at the facility, we saw it met a lot of our compliance requirements needed. Um, and the design, they help with how we would design the colo plus a DR as a service and how Zerto would mix into that. So we ended up signing on with them, and the project is underway, and it's anticipated to be completed around end of Q2 or early Q3.
Have you seen already some of the benefits of moving to a colo facility and kind of using the DRAS model?
I have, and a lot of my prior experience, I used to work in Manhattan, which we'll get into later on, but a lot of it, since post 9/11, a lot of companies want to get their infrastructure out of Manhattan. So the colo model was very near and dear to me because I've done that a lot. And the DRAS model is, I've done that as well for those companies that didn't have that big footprint and they wanted um, a cost-effective solution. And as those type of solutions, especially with Zerto, evolve, um, it makes them a lot more sense for some companies, especially smaller companies.
Yeah, absolutely. And big shout out to Expedient, one of our great partners. So we have over 250 managed service providers actually that like Expedient that can provide disaster recovery as a service. So that's another great aspect that we have. So Lou, over to you. Same question or same ask, I should say. Can you take us through your Zerto, or excuse me, your environment prior to Zerto?
Sure. So again, as it states on the slide there, we had 4 data centers within the U.S., Canada, and U.K. We had locations in Connecticut and Ashburn, Virginia. We also had uh, one of our we merged with Express Scripts. They had data centers in Chicago and Piscataway, New Jersey. Um, we've also had a couple international data centers, one in Glasgow, and then again our Toronto site in Canada. Um, from there, we've expanded out, and so and I kind of talked already about the struggle with SRM and VMware. It was a key portion of why we moved to Zerto. And again, if we look at the after, what we're doing inside there is we're expanding our footprint. We now have expansion out in India as well as Asia Pacific, where we're working through Korea and other areas. They're also using Zerto as well, and we're just kind of partnering up to make sure, from a compliance standpoint, everybody's working the same, standardizing on what we do. And again, I think one of the key things for us is the ability to protect at a granular level what we want to protect when we're protecting our virtual machines. And in our case, it really is looking at our tier one apps, that provide access to care for our customers, making sure that there are multiple layers of protection there. And again, to keep that uptime going, because those are the ones that have a high cost factor when they're down, as well as other sites within our environment too, that have SLAs that need to be met and kept from a contractual standpoint. I think one of the things to point out from a success story is that Zero also offered us the ability to use not the same of everything on each side. So we could go from something at our production site to a lower system or a different system, switch vendors if we needed to, and still protect the data and bring it up and make sure it was protected properly. Um, One of the things that I want to point out that I think Zerto's been really helpful with is early on, when we were testing compliance between two of our core data centers, we kept running into an issue where the throughput was throttling, and we didn't understand why. When we reached out to Zerto, it had been that in essence our WAN link was bigger than what had been designed in the product. The engineers went back, rebuilt the product in a couple of days. We were able to go with the higher throughput, and I think it's that kind of partnership that helps make sure that we're getting what we need, but also hopefully expanding for others as well. And Zerto's been always been very quick to help with issues like that, but also listen from needs from other customers, what else they might want to see in the product.
Well, you that's again another great testimonial here. I promise we didn't pay Lou or Ted to say any of this, so um, this is just how how it is, I guess, working with Zerto. And again, another perfect segue to um, to our next section here. What made you both choose Zerto? So we'll stay with Lou here. As I mentioned earlier, both Ted and Lou are really Zerto early adopters, and you'll learn a little bit about their story. And they've both been with Zerto decade plus now. So Lou, we'll stay with you here, and you want to take us through your Zerto journey.
Yeah, and again, it's similar to what I just mentioned. We have been with Zerto now for 10 years. We kept struggling with the existing footprint that we had from a disaster recovery standpoint. And we would go and run a test, and portions would pass, portions would fail, and inevitably it came down to the software not matching up properly with the storage at times, or the storage being readily available. We needed a solution that was a bit more nimble, a bit more agile, and able to help in other areas. And as I mentioned before, working with Zerto, it answered what we needed to make sure that, again, we can maintain our compliance. Our DR tests run seamlessly now. We can do audits within the system. We've expanded a little bit in that space just from a product standpoint, where we can test out products again inside a DR bubble, make sure they work as they need to. It's not necessarily disaster recovery, but again, it gives us the ability to segment that area and then make sure that things are getting done, and we can do it quickly, which I think is really one of the critical things and different than that legacy SRM software that we were using before. So a lot of it, as it says in the red slide there, ability to use different source and target hardware. That really was one of the big factors, because we didn't always have like to like on both sides of a WAN link. Now it doesn't matter if we do or we don't, as long as we can, be successful in the ability to protect it, but also to restore it quickly.
Sure. Yeah, and that flexibility there to use different hardware. That's again another story we hear all the time from our customers. So Ted, um, you've been a loyal Zertonian, we should say, for over 10 years now, for um, almost 15 years. So why don't you kind of take us through your journey?
Sure. Back around 2010, I was working in Manhattan for an IT managed services provider, and as Lou mentioned, products around that time um, were like VMware SRM or even like BMT Recover Point. So those were the quote unquote hypervisor based replication systems or DR recovery applications that we used at the time, and they were a lot of manual efforts to bring up replicated copies in the alternate site. They were great for the replication copies, but then there was just always that extra level of engineering that you need to do to get it stood up in DR, and then the failed back process was pretty cumbersome. And then, some of the partners at the MSP I worked for told us about this new product called Zerto and that we should give it a try. So a lot of engineers, installed it at some clients and then immediately took off. Like, just the functionality difference was night and day, and it became just really easy to use. There's a lot of less manual efforts, and the analytics and reporting that were built into the system, and that was provided to either our clients or to the business. Um, that was exactly what they looked for from a compliance standpoint, because it showed successful failovers, the RPOs and RTOs, and other data that some regulators would look for. So that was great, and we installed it for pretty much our entire client base and replace whatever they were using at the time. Then I jumped to another MSP and I did the same thing. I was like, hey, you guys know about Zerto? And like they have heard about it, and they were already a partner. So it was great to see that they were Zerto was already making a name for themselves and taking off. And any subsequent job that I've been to, if they had it, that's great. If they didn't, for example, in 2017 when I joined banking, um, I evaluated their DRBCP, and they did a lot of stand-to-stand replication with manual failover. So immediately in my head, I thought, okay, let's get Zerto in here. I personally reached out to Zerto and asked for a proof of concept. And once we showed that, and then I provided the analytics to the BCP team, they were just in awe and said, okay, we need this installed in the bank. So we shortly thereafter became a customer, and it's worked great for the bank ever since. Then you fast forward to Bankwell in 2022 when I joined. It was a very similar blueprint where, as I mentioned, they did a lot of the enterprise backup snapshots. So immediately got a POC put in for Zerto, and it was shortly implemented thereafter, and then already reduced engineering efforts considerably. And as mentioned, it's going to be part of the DR as a service project that's in flight today.
So did you even have time to onboard at Bankwell, or was your first day there, you were like, we need Zerto, forget everything else?
It
That's
was
my
like
first.
one of the first things I walked into. It's just like a question I asked. I'm like, hey, what do you guys use for DRBCP? And like, I think it was just like a habit, just because throughout my career, it's always been Zerto, 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 and like, which is a
Yeah.
great thing because when I truly believe in a product, I do want to utilize it in any position that I'm in. So if I have some influence to do that, I will do so.
No, that's an awesome story. Um, so finally, the last section here is what we've kind of talked about a little bit more holistically of how Zerto has helped with compliance, SLAs, things like that. Now we're going to look a little bit deeper into uh, how Zerto really impacted Bankwell and Cigna with some measurable results. So Ted, right back to you. If you could actually kind of just walk us through some of these results that you guys have achieved with Zerto.
Sure, no problem. So as you mentioned, what Zerto brings already is the reduced, RPO and RTO times, right? So upon average, our RPOs were under 15 seconds, and our RTOs were, estimated around 15 seconds per server, depending how many we want to fail over during that. Because with Zerto, you're able to, create your VPGs and select, group by application and just do it by apps, or you can utilize the whole site. Um, as mentioned, I'm utilizing for the migration of our tertiary site to a new colo, DR as a service. So that's underway and it's going rather well as well. Performing live and test failovers and the ability to reverse replicate. So as mentioned, if you want that quote unquote active scenario where you want to have some primary applications at one site, but then have the ability to move some specific targeted business applications to an alternate site, you have that ability with Zerto's continuous replication. You can choose to fail it over in a test or a live manner. And then if you want to keep it there, you can change it to reverse replicate. So I've utilized all those scenarios and they work seamlessly. Part of the bank's compliance, we do perform DR tests once or twice per year. And utilizing Zerto, they meet our audit compliance requirements without a hitch. And Zerto DR testing takes about 85% less time than with the manual. Let's say it can take 4 hours to a day. So it's a considerable effort with engineering hours reduced by using Zerto. And at previous institutions, I used Zerto to help out with data center and legacy application migration. So in an instance where mergers and acquisitions and there's, say, a legacy banking application that we have to rebuild, working with the vendor and estimating it would take maybe about 2 weeks to rebuild. We just had a thought like, why don't we just use Zerto to replicate it over to our environment? So we connected both vCenters, utilized our licensing, and we're able to create a VPG to replicate that legacy application. And we got it done in a few hours versus weeks to rebuild it. So it was tremendous to have that application at our disposal.
Yeah, that I mean, all these results are pretty astounding. But this one sticks out to me so much.
Yes.
Could take weeks to rebuild the application, but with Zerto, it can be migrated within an hour. So that's huge. Um, Lou, if you could take us through your results with Zerto and Cigna.
Sure. So, again, similar story to Ted's as well. We're utilizing it in a lot of different areas, which is why the license count is as high as it is. But again, if you look at the RPO, it's under 15 seconds, and RTO of 3 minutes. Again, from our perspective, we weren't seeing anywhere near those numbers with our other, backup solutions and DR solutions. We did consolidate away from both SRM and SRDF as part of the Zerto usage here. And again, it's just from both an efficiency standpoint, and it works in multiple areas. We've been able to shut down 2 data centers and 1 full relocation of a data center using Zerto. Again, so instead of lift and shift or forklift approach on any of the items, been able to do this where we've staged and been able to move things across. And I realize it's not here, but similar to what Ted was talking about, we also use this for um, uh, mergers and acquisitions as well, where we've got to take an application that's going to be transferred to a different entity. We'll build out a site. We'll use Zerto. We'll replicate it. When the time is right, we basically flip the switch. It's now in the target site and away from our site. And it's been a great tool for that as well. The numbers again: 10,000 plus test failover, 65,000 migrations. Helps us again from meeting the compliance needs. We have the reporting that helps with the compliance as well. Multiple DR tests, within the environment, depending upon either requirements for SLAs and contracts, or again, we test out new applications, different applications with our DR tests to make sure that in the event of a disaster recovery, we can recover properly. And then the big one at the bottom, 80% less time with previous DR technology. So, it's a good story. We've had good luck with it, and that's why we continue to grow it here at Cigna.
That's awesome, Lou. That's and the DR testing taking 80% less time, and Ted, I think they had a similar number at Bankwell. That's one thing I think sometimes can get overlooked because if you think Zerto, you think low RPO, low RTO, but but testing is another huge aspect of and that we really pride ourselves on. So with that, Lou, Ted, thank you again so much for joining and for being loyal Zerto customers now for so long. Um, we have the final thing I want to leave you with here and this is just a quick, nice little summary of what we talked about over the previous 30-40 minutes, right? So with Zerto, you're able to resume operations at scale in minutes, recover to a state seconds before a disruption. And on top of that, as we just mentioned, you can de-risk your recovery with quick, efficient, non-disruptive testing that you can do at any time, um, all while being able to simplify the protection, recovery, and mobility of your apps and data across your cloud, hybrid cloud, or multi cloud environment. And this is all done in a nice, easy software only deployment method and a flexible architecture that really allows you to protect and work with any type of environment. So, if you would like to learn a little bit more about Zerto, you're a financial services organization, you're a healthcare organization, really any company, but these two sectors especially, we do have specific web pages dedicated um, to these industries to learn a little bit more about what we offer. And of course, we invite you to take Zerto for a spin with our hands-on labs and product tour as well. So with that, thank you so much for joining today, and we'd love to answer any of your questions you might have. Okay, looks like we have a few questions that have come in. The first one is for Lou. So Lou, have any of the recent cyber attacks on major healthcare organizations that have been in the news make you take another look at your cybersecurity and data protection strategy? So that's actually a great question.
Yeah, so the short answer is yes. It ends up being a situation where we have to continually monitor what we're doing, how we're doing it, and then we get advice from both the vendors, but also in regards to our information protection team here at Cigna. So we continue to evaluate that, make sure that again from what we're doing, we minimize the risk to the enterprise.
Okay, great. Next question is actually there's one for Ted. Ted, what types of challenges from a data protection aspect are you seeing with the rise of fintech like mobile banking, digital wallets, etc.?
Well, I mean, not just like with the increase with fintech partnerships, but just financial services in general and banking. But as we partner with fintechs, we have to look at how they secure their data because a lot of them have SaaS-based offerings. So we have to look at their the way they implement their security and make sure it's compliant with the bank. Because as we put that type of data, and especially if it's sensitive in nature, we just have to make sure that we're adhering to all of our standards. So it's a challenge, but so far a lot of the partnerships that we do have meet the security standards.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. And then the next one, so that looks like the next few are just kind of more general Zerto questions. So I'll just rattle them off really quick. And do you need any hardware to run Zerto? So the answer to that is no. We are a software only solution, so no extra hardware needed. When VMs get restored, are they all different points in time? So no, actually, when VMs actually get restored, they get restored as one cohesive entity. So that actually avoids those inconsistent recovery times that you get, potentially with other solutions where they're going to get restored at different points in time. And then the last question we have, what type of replication does Zerto use? So that, I think I mentioned it earlier, but near synchronous replication. So that really is the best of both worlds. Better, it's less impact on your production and it's really the best of both worlds. So looks like that is the end of the questions. Again, thank you everybody today for joining, and we will be sending out a copy of this recording shortly. So thanks again, and take care.